I've done a lot of talking about the job market in the past couple of years because it's just been, it's been pretty dire, but also quite interesting because Salesforce has a certain history, where everything's been booming, everything's been great. And I think really, for the first time ever, things aren't that great. This is Salesforce Ben Insider, the podcast that brings you all the top Salesforce news, insights, and trends, completely unfiltered. Join me, Ben McCarthy, and some great special guests as we dive into the Salesforce discussions you won't hear anywhere else. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of SF Ben Insider, where we talk about all the Salesforce trends and insights into the Salesforce ecosystem that you won't hear anywhere else. And today I'm joined by Matt Hafford.
Hi, Ben.
Cloudway Talent. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Great to have you here. So today we're going to be speaking about something that I think has been on the minds of every single Salesforce professional, which is job market trends overall. That's our overall kind of theme for today. But also going in quite deep into this, we've got a few kind of stats to share from our salary survey, which is upcoming, which is really exciting. And also dive into the niche Salesforce market as well, because it's something that we've talked about so much. And Matt is the expert of all things niches in the Salesforce market. So, Matt, if you could give us an introduction into yourself and your background as well.
Sure. So I'm Matt. As you know, I run Cloudway Talent. We are a London-based Salesforce-focused agency that provide permanent and freelance solutions in Salesforce. My journey in Salesforce started off in about 2018. I'd recruited in other IT-related markets before that, but purely by luck, we ended up working on quite a big Salesforce program around then, and the growth and opportunity that we found in Salesforce just completely surpassed all of the other markets that we worked in. So for me, working in the Salesforce community is something that has been great fun, and we're kind of really looking forward to where it's going to go in the future.
Yeah, amazing. And how many people were you managing before you?
7 now.
7 now.
Had much bigger teams before at my previous company, but we are kind of start-up, scale-up, if you want to sound a bit cooler. And we're on that journey.
Nice. Very cool. So I first met Matt. He cold messaged me on LinkedIn and said he'd buy me lunch, which is a surefire way to get a meeting with me. So
it's typical recruiter, isn't it? Just sneaking into the inbox and asking a favour.
I get a free lunch at one of my favourite barbecue restaurants. Great. Me and Matt have known each other for a couple of years now, and we always kind of meet up to chat about the job market. And I've done a lot of talking about the job market in the past couple of years because it's just been, it's been pretty dire, but also quite interesting because Salesforce has a certain history, where everything's been booming, everything's been great. And I think really, for the first time ever, things aren't that great at the moment. So, and you joined. So when did you set up Cloudway?
So Cloudway was 2021. So we joined when kind of the fanfare was ongoing in the Salesforce ecosystem.
So COVID was like 2020. Everything crashed. And then everyone realized they needed cloud solutions and everything. So you were kind of I think the peak was 2022, right? So 2021 was maybe
I think we kind of timed it brilliantly for the first 18 months, and now it looks ill-advised. That first couple of years was such an interesting time in the Salesforce ecosystem. I'd sort of never seen anything like it before.
So give us a bit of an insight then. Give us kind of a short little history into what happened in 2020, 2021, all the way up to today.
Well, starting off with COVID, which is where every bad conversation begins, but it was an awkward time for the first maybe 3-6 months after, with I guess people being sent to work full time from home. There was some nervousness with customers around, okay, well, what does this mean? What's the world going to look like? I don't think that was just in Salesforce. I think that was in everything. But it became quite clear quite quickly that there was still going to be spending power, money, investment out there. And a lot of end clients really had to kind of upgrade a lot of their internal functions immediately to deal with the new world that we were living in. So there were certain markets in Salesforce that had just never seen sales and growth like it. So I think we all got very accustomed to thinking, well, we're on board a rocket ship now. Every customer in the world is going to have Salesforce within 18 months, and we're all going to be running enormous businesses really, really soon. But as often is the case with these things, it doesn't last forever. And there was kind of a big boom in certain products that have maybe leveled off slightly since. I think dire is one word to describe it. I think mixed is the word I've been using to not sound too downcast, but it has been a tricky, let's say, year, 15 months in the Salesforce ecosystem, with a backdrop of people talking about layoffs, lack of customer spend, and maybe some companies not achieving the growth or numbers that they want. But there are still some good success stories out there, which I'll try and talk more about that than the other side of it. Otherwise, this might get a bit depressing quite quickly.
Yeah, it's true. Dire is a strong word, and maybe dire in comparison to what it was like, because it's not to say that, you know, the Salesforce ecosystem is great, and there are, you know, people in technical roles get paid pretty well, you know, even if salaries maybe have come down a little bit from the peak. But, you know, yeah, it's still a very good career. It's just changed a lot. So, I mean, maybe give us a bit of insight into kind of the saturation topic and how that came about.
Yeah, this is something we've talked about a lot. And it's something that you guys at Salesforce Ben put out a really good blog post about. I think it was about a month or 2 months ago, about are the days of easy Salesforce careers over? And I thought it really kind of hit the nail on the head with the conversations that we're having with a lot of people. I think when the market was booming, there was huge amounts of customers buying Salesforce, whatever it might be. There was just a huge lack of talent across the ecosystem that every consultancy and every end customer was feeling. So if you decided to join Salesforce as a newbie, or whether you chose to kind of get into Salesforce at the medium level, you could almost get your CV up to a few places. You'd get interviews straight away, and it was in your hands who you wanted to join. And that's not been the case for the last year. And I think where the amount of roles has gone down quite a lot, and the amount of talent that came to ecosystem went up a lot 18 months ago, there's a bit of a disparity at the moment between supply and demand, which obviously makes finding a new job and securing a new job quite tricky.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was kind of, you know, Salesforce, it was kind of a magic combination of Salesforce growing really fast. They grew from 4 billion in 2014 to nearly 40 billion in, you know, 2024, like absolutely gigantic. But it's also a relatively unknown company and unknown career path, right? And that was the whole point of Salesforce releasing Trailhead, to skill more people up. The Trailblazer movement, in terms of, you know, it's very common at Salesforce conferences and Dreamforce to bring people on stage who had landed a Salesforce job from a, you know, completely non-tech background. So, you know, being a hairdresser or something like that, and they've been told about Salesforce, skilled up on Trailhead, and then, you know, landed the job. You know, fair play on them, absolutely fantastic. But I suppose, you know, what happened then is, yeah, Salesforce started booming. The Trailblazer movement worked its magic. Also, lots of boot camps popped up and started saying, you can land a 6-figure job in 6 months, just go on Trailhead, follow our advice, and get a job. And that's what was happening. Loads of people were landing jobs from these boot camps. From, you know, I mean, we used to promote Salesforce careers non-stop to anyone that would listen. I would tell, you know, my friends and my family, you know, get on Trailhead, get your cert, you can get a job. It was true for many years, but not so much anymore.
You don't see as much of those narratives, particularly on LinkedIn these days, do you? That there really was a time where the drive of get into Salesforce and you're going to have this amazing career that kicks off incredibly quickly. I've not seen many of those kind of posts in the last year. I mean,
people do talk about that, but those are the people that are selling boot camps.
Yeah, but you like to think everyone knows that, though. You like to think everyone sort of can see that a little bit.
I mean, the thing is, yes, but these boot camps target people who are outside the Salesforce ecosystem. So they don't necessarily, I think they need to change their marketing a bit. Not that they ever would, because otherwise they wouldn't sell as many boot camps. But I think, yeah, they're targeting people from outside an ecosystem, still selling them the dream. And I'm sure if you took a boot camp, you might land a job. There is a chance you might land a job. But I think it's, you know, it's not very honest to talk about 6-figure salaries.
Yeah, there's still a good narrative there of, I think you just can't view it as something that's going to happen within 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
You can say you get into Salesforce, learn, land a job, and you will go on to have a great career, which I'm sure in most instances would be completely true. But I think to put, I guess, a financial figure that heavy on something quickly, I think would be a bit unreasonable right now.
I think another thing that's happened as well is Salesforce is getting, we spoke about this in the last podcast, but it's getting a lot more complicated. So when I started and got my first role, I had 3 months experience at a consultancy that wasn't really paying me. It was more like an internship. So I got a job as an admin, which I was very lucky to have my admin cert. I was working with workflow rules, custom fields, custom objects, really basic functionality. I barely knew anything about business, so I was just like, it was basically like a support desk. So things would come in and say, I need I need the ability to create reports. Okay, that's easy. Go on permission, stuff like that. But I think companies now, they expect a lot more out of their admin. The tech has changed a lot, but also, I mean, I don't want to downplay an admin's role, because I think you'll often get two types of admins. You would have got the ones like me starting off in my career doing quite basic, customer support desk kind of things. And then you would get the ones who wear a lot of hats, and they know about business, they know about requirements gathering, engaging with stakeholders, all this kind of stuff, and creating really impactful solutions inside an organization. And I kind of feel like that is really the only admin role really that companies want to hire for nowadays.
I think you'd be the one struggling to find a job in that scenario.
Yes, 100%. I was so happy to land that job when I started, and I felt I was so cool, 3 months experience, admin cert, land this job. But yeah, I just don't think, if you think about the platform now, which I think is fantastic, by the way, you've got Flows, Lightning App Builder, those are I guess those are two main, declarative solutions on the platform, but you can do so much with them, which means you can also do so much wrong with them as well if you don't know what you're doing. So it's got more powerful, but slightly more nuanced and more complex.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It's definitely true. And there's just so many more components now as well, and you've still got a lot of companies that have been acquired that still don't actually sit in the core platform as well. So if you wanted to cover kind of every product that a company sold or worked with, that's going to be really tricky with under 3 or 4 years experience.
That's a very good point. So when I landed my first job, Marketing Cloud was just becoming acquired, I think. So it was basically sales and service.
So that's it.
And that was it. And then since then, you got whatever, too many to list, essentially. And also Salesforce's whole strategy is land and expand. Sell one app, Sales Cloud, and then sell them the rest of the dream. So a lot of companies out there are going to have those multi-cloud solutions now. Yeah,
for sure, which makes an admin's job really difficult.
Yeah, 100%. So I thought something else I'd mention just before we kind of speak about the current market and, if there's any light at the end of the tunnel at all, and maybe how we see it going forward. There are I feel like there's numbers being thrown around a lot, and not so much by Salesforce, but more by boot camps as well.
They're getting some stick today, aren't they?
Always by me. They're 9.3 million new Salesforce jobs. I'm sure you've heard this.
Yeah,
so
Salesforce, saw that statistic,
Salesforce always release this IDC paper. So IDC are this research firm that sits separate from Salesforce, and they generate a report on the Salesforce economy. And there's this really nice soundbite, which is 9.3 million new jobs created in the Salesforce ecosystem, something like that. But I think the interesting thing is those 9.3 million new jobs aren't admin jobs, developer jobs, marketing cloud jobs. So here is the quote. So the 9.3 million new jobs is split into two: direct jobs and indirect jobs. So you have direct jobs, which are created in the Salesforce customer base, so in the end users. From the revenues generated by the use of Salesforce and its ecosystem's cloud services. So it's basically saying by using Salesforce, your revenue grows so you can hire more people.
But not in Salesforce.
Potentially in Salesforce, but probably not.
Probably not.
It's just talking about companies growing in general. And then you have a bigger section of that 9.3 million new jobs, which are those created indirect jobs, are those created in the economy by people filling the direct jobs and by spending on local goods and services. So essentially, the economy, the local economy, whatever in London, let's say, growing because these other companies are growing and people are spending more money in the economy. So someone might open a coffee shop because there's need for more coffee because people want to spend more money.
Hiring new baristas would count towards that statistic.
Yeah. So I think that's a big misconception. And actually, we posted about that saying, hey, 9.3 million new jobs, thinking it was admin a while ago, but yes, it's not. And there has been a new one since then, which is 11.6 million new jobs from AI or something like that. And again, it's exactly the same. I
think that feels even more vague because that whole topic is vague.
It
so
is.
I think,
I think that's another podcast. Let's
true.
Go down that rabbit hole.
True.
But yeah, I mean, Matt, give us kind of your insights on, what's going to happen with this current market. Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Is Salesforce doomed? Are salaries going to keep going down? Hopefully not. But how do you see it?
So the way I see it, and I'm lucky here that as I've worked in other IT markets and have recruited in other areas, I think I probably see it as slightly less doom and gloom than others do. Not every day, but some days. I think with Salesforce, not just over the COVID, but post-COVID boom, but even before that, I think it's been such an amazing journey of growth that has felt really relentless for a long time, and it's always felt so positive and front-footed. I think the way things feel now is probably how a lot of IT markets feel and how a lot of other software vendors are performing right now. I don't think Salesforce right now is especially unique in the sense that it's not having the easiest of times. I just think we've been kind of allowed the luxury to not feel the pain that some other markets have felt. Like if you look at SAP, Oracle, they're more steady and more stable. The growth numbers are far less
Been around
impressive.
for a lot longer, right? Like 1970s, 1980s.
Yeah, and you don't get end of year statistics where they say 40% growth in this or double stock price in that. But every year is pretty consistent, moving forwards, and the products and services are improving. I think in Salesforce maybe there's just a little bit of a feeling of having been in the really special club that was ripping up trees, and now, not literally, but now it kind of maybe feels like it's leveled off a little bit. So I guess that would be that's my view on it. My view is that it's leveled off slightly. It's maybe not quite as rocket ship vibes as it was, but there are still good things happening out there. There are still products that are performing really well. There's still new services and new products being added all the time. So there's still lots to be excited about. We just maybe need to manage our expectations where it comes to maybe quite how exciting it felt 3 years ago.
Yeah, completely agree. I remember when I first got my job in London back in 2012 with Salesforce, and someone I knew had just landed the job as a Microsoft Dynamics admin, and we were talking about it quite a lot. And, I was talking about all this cool stuff in Salesforce, Dreamforce and these characters dancing around at, world tour and stuff like that. And this guy just like didn't know what I was talking about. And just like, I was so excited about my career in Salesforce, and I was talking about how much money I could potentially earn. And it just was not the same in Dynamics at all. And, I didn't know what Dynamics growth rates are like, but obviously, it was just very, very different from Salesforce. So I think the way that I see it is I think the job market is going through its first ever, because I've only been in the sales system since 2012, but I think it's going through its first ever reset. So, we've gone through the boom, things are starting to level off. Salesforce's growth might improve in the future. I think we're down to single digits now, quarterly growth like 9%, and it's come down from about 25%. And maybe it will grow like that in the future as well. But I think now that the talent pool has increased so much, I feel like even if Salesforce, let's say data cloud, suddenly really took off and became, or AI really took off and became absolutely massive, I kind of feel like it's probably enough people in the ecosystem now to be able to fill those roles.
It would be a lot of changing of specialism for people, though.
Yeah.
There'll be a lot of people that work in certain products that have been really busy up until this point. Like just to give one example, like B2C commerce, for instance, is, I would say, going through a tricky time at the moment. That was incredibly high performing for a number of years up until about 18 months ago. And now there's a lot of particularly freelancers available with really amazing skill sets, lots of years of experience, worked on some amazing projects that are finding it really tricky to find jobs. Yeah. And when they do find them, it's not quite what it was 18 months ago in terms of the rates, which may have gone down by 30, 40% in that time. So I do think a lot of it's going to come down to what you specialise in, what products you're good with, and kind of where you can bring value to the companies that you're working with. And if that's going to be AI, if that's going to be data, then great. But yeah, I think we are going to see a lot of people leave some of the, I guess larger products now and move into something new.
Yeah, and we'll come on to talk about those kind of niches in a second. But I think this is the first stat I've teased from our upcoming salary survey. But I think in America, it was always said that, in the US, you would earn at least six figures as a Salesforce admin. After you've got a few years experience going up to whatever. But as you've just said, and I think it's being talked about quite a lot on LinkedIn, I see people posting, quite angry that they're being only offered X amount per hour or this salary, because before they were offered this amount. But, I think it just is a reflection of the economy. The average amount, and there is about 200 data sets behind this, so it's a pretty good average in the US for an admin who is intermediate, about 3 years experience, is $93,000.
That's lower than I thought it would be.
So it seems a little bit lower. Obviously, it's still a very good salary, but it does seem, lower. I think Salesforce used to talk about 114K, something, I think, on the Trailhead website.
I'd imagine that was higher 2 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. We were speaking before this about, I put this in the Easy Salesforce post, but I was hearing about crazy salaries. One of my friends was director at a consultancy, and one of her employees left to get paid £100,000, not dollars, pounds in the UK, and she had 2 years experience, something like that, 3 or 2 years experience. That's a huge amount of money, to be getting paid. So it was a strange time. But to kind of wrap up this section, everything's cyclical, right? And it's hard to know if everything's cyclical if you're kind of a bit younger, because you haven't gone through those. I suppose the last crash was, COVID slightly, but then the financial crash, and I was quite young then. But things are cyclical, so we assume that things should recover and get better slowly as Salesforce is still growing, 9% a year, but we'd hope they grow a bit faster. AI takes off. Things like that. But in the UK market specifically, a lot of consultancies have been acquired, right? Over my past 10 years, I've forgotten the names of loads of them now, but like Tequila and consultancies like that, they were all snapped up by Accenture, Deloitte, PwC, because I think they weren't in Salesforce, and then they acquired these consultancies to get in Salesforce. And I think we were talking about quite a lot of consultancies in the UK who are kind of resetting the cycle now, right? Because you've got all these mid-market partners who have been acquired out, which leaves a gap for people who aren't the big four to come in and service like enterprise clients. But give us a bit of kind of insight into that side of the market.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been very smart with their timing. There's a lot of people that have left mid-sized consultancies to start their own thing, and I think that's slightly more individual style, that's slightly more kind of close feel to customers. I think it's having quite a big impact in the market at the moment. Like, we've seen a lot of consultancies that now just specialise in individual verticals, whether it be products or whether it be industry. We're seeing a lot of those consultancies performing and growing really well. I think customers at the moment are really after specialist experience, kind of reviews and references from the exact same sector as them. And I think some of the bigger consultancies have had a much harder time with new customer acquisition. So those new partners, those small partners that have connections, they can hire from their own internal referral networks of people that are experts in what they've started, are having some really good success actually. But as you said, it's cyclical, and in 2 years' time, I imagine they're all going to be owned by the same companies as everyone else. Well, they'll be hoping so anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, I think it's because, I'm sure they're still quite expensive, these consultancies, because they've got good experience, but probably less expensive than Accenture and stuff like that. And in a time where, money's tight, people are probably looking for these really highly specialized boutique consultancies that have a lot of experience.
For sure. I think another thing with that as well, sorry to interrupt, is that we're seeing a lot of customer spending being in bits and pieces rather than enormous projects in one go. If you go to a smaller boutique partner, they're probably far more likely to sign up for the journey of your implementation rather than what a huge consultancy might need, which is, we can't commit to you unless you are spending $500,000. Well, yeah, I went with $500,000, but you're probably right.
Yeah, no, very true. And just to kind of round off this section, then before we go to speak about niche skills, we did ask in our salary survey, is the market more challenging than previous years? And 80% said it was. So, I think everyone knows this stuff is going on, but it is interesting to see the stats as well. So,
it must be okay for some people though, that not everyone is in the same situation to some degree. It's not like it's one vertical that's completely dropped or one demographic of people that's unable to find a job. It has been a right sizing or a slowdown in the market. So I think we all just have to adjust to the new norm and make the best of it we can.
Yeah. So moving on to perhaps a slightly happier topic, which is about niche skills. So this is something that we've been talking about at Salesforce Ben for quite a few years now. And I think this is actually, we started talking about it more when we engaged with you on that post about 30 Salesforce specializations that you can adopt. So can you give us an explanation to what niche skills are? Yeah, exactly.
Well, when we started Cloudway Talent, we wanted to be able to do something different to the other Salesforce recruiters that sit out there in the market. I think a lot of our competition, particularly back then, were far more generalist in their approach. So you'd have recruiters that would service the French market, for instance. But as Salesforce has got bigger and more complex, I don't really think that's good enough anymore. I think you need to have a better network and know individual technologies better. So we must have had this conversation, I think, 3 years ago now, and we were super passionate from day one that we wanted to have really good insight and expertise in individual parts of the Salesforce ecosystem, not necessarily all of it. So we started off with industry cloud solutions, mainly for communications cloud, so kind of projects for telecoms companies, and the specialist skills that we needed was CPQ, order management, EPC, and stuff like that. And that's not stuff that's kind of commonly used in Salesforce projects. It's not stuff that every developer or architect has experience with, but it's certainly like really necessary and kind of important tech to have if you're going to run a telecoms project in Salesforce. So we've been having these conversations for a long time. My colleagues and I are always talking about the new, exciting, changing developments that come up in Salesforce. But more and more so, even more now than before, I just think it's essential to have something in your profile that makes you stand out from other people. And expert product knowledge, for me, is the best thing that you can have.
Yeah, and this is the way the ecosystem's going, right? Like, I remember when I started in the ecosystem, there were like, I don't know, 5 or 6 certs. The roles were pretty much admin, dev, consultant, architect. Business analyst wasn't really a thing back then. You didn't have all these specialist products. So those were the roles. And if you look now, I mean, we did like a Salesforce infographic that had all like the career paths on it and stuff like that. There's probably at least 20, 30 plus kind of distinct roles now. So the ecosystem is getting more specialized in its roles. And as you were giving the example with the boutique consultancies before, they're operating in either, niche products or niche verticals. People need these skills out there. And I think it's always like, when I used to run a Salesforce consultancy, we used to specialize in financial services. And when I was competing against someone, I would always kind of give the examples. I was just like, look, you can have this other consultancy who might have not done financial services before, or you can use us who has done it 5-10 times. We've made all the mistakes. We know the solutions to implement. We know the jargon, And it's very similar to hiring an individual. If you know about, financial services is one of the biggest markets for Salesforce. And there's so much jargon and so much, you have to deal with particular type of people and they can be very demanding. And if you're someone that has done it before, made mistakes, you're gonna deliver a better solution, basically.
Completely agree. I think that example is almost an exact replica, right? Having done it before and knowing what hurdles you're going to have along the way, I think that's a huge value add that it takes years to build. And if you've got it, I think you're in such a good competitive advantage.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, you've got a few different types of verticals then. You can put kind of industry knowledge in one vertical, so maybe not product specialization, but just being a whiz at financial services cloud on core platform or something like that. But in terms of some of the more product-based roles you have recruited for, what are some of those niche roles in the ecosystem?
But the first thing to say about it is that almost every request we get now, I would say almost every, is for a niche of something. Very few roles now are core, can you do a bit of sales and service? Great. It's always with a backdrop of something else. Maybe it's marketing cloud, maybe it's commerce, maybe it's an industry cloud solution experience, like someone that's got experience with Omni Studio or someone that's done a comms cloud project for CPQ and EPC. So there's always something in a job spec.
And what's EPC?
Enterprise Product Catalog, which sits alongside CPQ. It's going to have to be a different podcast for a true technical breakdown, mainly because I can't do it, but I know some people that can. Nice. But there's always niche experience needed in roles now, particularly at the senior level. Even if you're a consultancy that sell multiple solutions, if you're going to hire someone, invest the money in them, you want them to bring something you don't have already. And that will, I would say, the vast majority of the time, that will be niche product experience.
Yeah, definitely. So you've got Commerce Cloud, you've got MuleSoft, right? Yep. I always hear MuleSoft is one of the most underserved kind of products. CPQ is obviously a big one. I've got some stats again from our salary survey. So, we've just covered that the average admin salary for an intermediate admin in the US is $93,000. Intermediate CPQ consultant, $200,000.
I mean, it sort of tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it?
So, there you go. And it's just supply and demand, right? If there were thousands and thousands of CPQ consultants out there, then the salary wouldn't be as high. But that isn't the case.
Yeah, I think that extra training that you do and the kind of efforts you go to make your skill set more desirable and less common pay off 5 times over throughout your career. And that's not to say it's easy, right? Like it is difficult to I guess, go from someone that is a core platform developer in Salesforce, and then you can't really just go on Trailhead, learn a few bits and pieces, and then call yourself a CPQ consultant. It doesn't really work like that. It's kind of one of the unfortunate parts of it, I think, at the moment. Clients want experience in things now. They don't want someone necessarily who is really interested in a certain area and is committed to learning. So that there is a bit of a barrier at the moment. Like the entry level feels a bit higher for niche skills than it was before.
So I think this is kind of a nice segue onto this topic about how you learn these niche skills, right? Because I think people have been a bit spoilt with Salesforce, because if you wanted to learn, back in the boom, you could go and learn Salesforce on Trailhead. You could get your admin cert. You could spin up a dev org. You could, play with basically every single core feature, apart from the kind of the add-ons and stuff. But you could basically play around with everything you need to do the job. But it's not as easy with niche skills. Anyone can go out and pass the CPQ cert. I think it's quite challenging, I've heard, but you can go out there, you can revise it and do it. But can you do an implementation after that CPQ cert? Definitely not, I would say. Could you land a CPQ job? Again, probably not, because they want you to do implementation. So, how do people learn these new skills?
It's a tricky one. You're definitely right that it felt easier before than it feels now. I think the best advice that you could give someone is be selective with the company that you're going to join. I think if you're coming completely from the cold, you work in one sector or with one product and you just do a bit of training, a certification, it's not going to be enough to get you working on projects in something else. So I think you can be selective particularly with consultancies, but it's pretty visible from consultancies' websites, their LinkedIn. Also, if you look at the people on the people tab on LinkedIn, you can see what type of profile they commonly hire for. So if you were to go to a consultancy where you knew that Revenue Cloud was one of the services they offered, even if you join in core platform, there is going to be opportunities to start to learn from people there and maybe in time move into one of those niche products. But it's definitely hard to do straight off the bat.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I'm sure, I know consultancies aren't hiring like they were a couple of years ago, but I'm sure consultancies want to skill up more people in these niches because, a small boutique consultancy that specializes in CPQ might have, 3 out of 10 of their consultants or something being, very good at CPQ. So I'm sure that's a skill they want to nurture. And it's something that obviously can be discussed with the consultancy before you're hired. End users as well, obviously, so obviously it's hard to work out what end users are using what products, but larger end users are probably going to be using a much wider variety of products. So hopefully you can get experience that way. But yeah, it really is on the job, isn't it? Which is kind of not the answer that people want to hear. But it's like I remember working with a woman that was a Pardot consultant, and she wanted to learn Marketing Cloud. And we had people in the business who could do Marketing Cloud, and she was spending a lot of time with them. But the thing is about Marketing Cloud is you almost need to be a developer to run it because it's so much like integrations with other systems, data tables that were really complex. You had AMP script to
it's very
build
different.
Really nice. It's very, very different from Pardot. So and I think she kind of gave up actually because it was a lot more complex than she thought. It wasn't really what she had in mind anyway, because it was basically being more of a developer.
You can see why. I mean, when we did the webinar together on Industry Cloud Solutions with Lucy, we were talking for a while about, well, how do you bridge that gap? And I think that the best thing that we came up with is there are often technologies that are similar or adjacent that might give you an opportunity to step from one to the other, but that doesn't make it straightforward and it doesn't make it easy. Like I think for Industry Clouds, we said that if you are a developer at your heart and you are a good developer, the jump to Omni Studio shouldn't be the most challenging one that you ever do. So if you were to become certified in Omni Studio, you were then to research jobs with consultancies that you knew sold Industry Cloud solutions. You are taking steps in the right direction. But I think that's sort of been the theme of what we talked about today, is that doing anything quickly right now seems the real challenge.
Yeah, definitely. And what, in your experience from the market at the moment, what would you say are the top 3 or top 5 most lucrative niches, maybe based on the mix of salary and kind of demand out there at the moment?
I think Revenue Cloud would definitely be very near the top of the list. You've seen a lot of consultancies grow very quickly behind Revenue Cloud because I think it's not a skill set that a lot of big consultancies would necessarily have available for new projects, and some of them may not have anyone really. Yeah. So that's definitely one that I think has been performing really well. We're getting a lot of requests for field service, which is interesting because we definitely weren't a year ago. So that's definitely one that I'd say is on the up. MuleSoft, you mentioned, was very busy last year. It's been quieter this year. Don't know why. Don't know what the main factors are, but I don't know whether it's other competing technologies. Boomi, Tibco are doing better. I don't know. But MuleSoft's definitely been quieter now that the acquisition was a little bit in the past. One that we've been getting a lot of requests for, which won't surprise anyone, is data. Not just specifically Salesforce data experience, but actually people coming from pure data backgrounds. So someone that works in data analytics, data warehousing.
To sort out stuff for AI or...
That's exactly that. I think it was quite funny. We talked about this at Dreamforce last year, that all we heard about was AI for pretty much 4 days straight, or was it 3 days straight? It all blends into itself after a while. But all we talked about was AI. Every conversation was about AI. But the follow-up conversation was, what does that actually mean? And there's some very senior people who didn't really know exactly what it meant at that point. But I think what we've learned about it this year is that until data usage and understanding improves, we're maybe not quite ready for the AI revolution that we hoped we were. So data skills has definitely been one that's been really sought after. And kind of across the board as well, not just specifically people that have worked in Tableau or whatever it might be, but kind of the full suite of what data skills can be.
It's really interesting, actually, because I think, if you did a survey around data across all orgs, I don't think anyone would say they're happy with the the level, the quality of their data in their org, but it needs to be for this AI revolution. And although data isn't the sexiest of topics, maybe it's a good pivot for Salesforce professionals to go into now, because all orgs are going to need to sort it out before the AI revolution.
For sure,
so.
for sure. And we're going through a migration at the moment where we're moving from our old CRM to a new one. Moving on to Salesforce, funnily enough, which we weren't before, which we try to keep quiet about. But we're moving on to Salesforce soon with HireGenius. I don't know if you know them.
Oh yeah.
I think you do. And it's only kind of by going through that process that I've realised how poor our data was. So we had a lot of kind of drive earlier this year of we wanted to start using more kind of AI and automation with our outbound marketing, because as a recruitment company, we'd never really used it before. We were very manual in the way that we worked. And as soon as we started to do it through the CRM, we realised, we're not ready for this, because 50% of what goes out is either going to bounce back or not be good enough to represent the brand in the way we want it represented. So we've had to take about 5 steps backwards to take 1 forward. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of companies going through a really similar kind of internal battle at the moment.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, so let's move on to our final section now. We'll have a kind of quick fire section. Where we talk about how to stand out in a crowded market. So, if we put niches to kind of one side, I suppose, because we've kind of, we've talked about that, we understand what niches are in demand at the moment. But what else can candidates do? Maybe admins out there who, are struggling to land a role at the moment, or people that are wanting to look for another role. What can they do to stand out from the crowd?
I think it depends on the context of how you want to stand out and who you want to stand out to. Like, we could give really basic advice here that in every interview process now, as soon as you meet a new customer, consultancy, whoever, they check your LinkedIn. They want to corroborate that your jobs look the same as they do on your CV. I think that's pretty standard. I think we all do that every time someone comes in for an interview. We kind of check on social media to try and learn a bit about them. So making sure that your profile is professional and detailed and very closely matching to your CV, I think is really important. And I think we said we won't go into the product stuff too much, but making sure that, I guess, the value you've brought to projects and what you've actually achieved is front and center and really visible. So when recruiters search for profiles, we'll often search by key terms of what we know that we need. So let's say, for instance, you're someone that works in B2B commerce primarily. The more times that's commented on in your profile and the more times that comes up in your previous job descriptions, the higher in the search results you're going to come. So I think making sure that you tie your LinkedIn profile and your online presence around the thing that you are looking to achieve, I think is really important. I know that sounds super basic, but I think it is quite a thing that not everyone does maybe as well as they could.
I mean, it's a good point, though, because maybe someone listening to this has gone, actually, I did do a field service project a couple of years ago. Maybe they're not a complete expert on it, but they think they could land a job in it. Make that, more front and center than over the fact they're an admin, or maybe maybe their title's an admin at the moment, and maybe they don't mention field service that much. But it makes sense, right? It's kind of like you know, when they say, you know, write a cover letter for every kind of job you apply for about why you want to...
Don't do that.
Don't
do that.
Too much of a waste of time.
Yeah, I think so. I think we agree on that generally, don't we? I think people don't write cover letters anymore.
Yeah, is it not? Okay, I haven't applied for a job in a while, so
I imagine you haven't. Yeah. Do people send you cover letters?
No, actually, that's a good point. Yeah.
Would it hold you back from hiring someone if you didn't have like that initial motivation statement?
That's a good point, because I didn't even expect it.
No.
But if I wanted to write something, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I would if it was. Yeah, I don't know. But I suppose LinkedIn and the CV is probably enough. Cover letter on top of that is
I think making the LinkedIn really clear. Like, there's a few candidates we've worked with before where we've kind of, let's say we've had a hard search to find a specific skill, and there's someone who 2 years ago it will say they worked at Deloitte in B2B commerce, and that'll be like the 4th bullet point out of 5 bullet points, and you go, I wonder how much experience that really is. Get them on the phone, speak to them, and it's like, oh yeah, I did 2.5 years of running implementations on B2B commerce. You're like, why didn't you put that in the first place? But I guess it's up to everyone how they choose to market themselves. But I think you've got to try and lead with what makes you stand out or what makes you different from all of the other people that are applying for the same job.
Yeah, I think you've got to really critically evaluate yourself and your skills and what is important in this market, because it's something that we talk about a lot here in terms of what content people like. The content people like changes month to month. 1 month everyone was really into AI. The next month everyone's bored of it and, you know, really doesn't want to read any more about AI. So I'm sure it's exactly the same in the job market as well, you know, as things kind of as things change. So yeah, really interesting about the LinkedIn profile, and I suppose that kind of means do you need to kind of, you know, focus on maybe one type of job at a time then? You know, is that a best recommendation so you can tailor your LinkedIn profile?
I think there's a kind of a dangerous line here, isn't there, of like, can you present yourself in 4 or 5 different ways depending on what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah.
The answer is probably yes. Yeah. And the answer is, to some extent, maybe you need to, particularly if you've got a background or a range of experience that covers a lot of different things. Like, I'm not saying to edit your LinkedIn profile every time you apply for a job, and you definitely don't need to do like changing your subject line to experienced B2B commerce developer. You don't need to do that, but you do need to lead with the things that people want to read, and that goes for your CV as well. We get a lot of CVs where there's so much text and so much project detail, it's actually really hard to pick out what is the expertise this person has that makes them brilliant, because everyone's done things in their career that should be credit in the bank that I guess is impressive to clients when you meet them. But if you kind of, I guess, bog it down with a lot of other stuff that's far less impressive and far less important, you might kind of muddy the waters for yourself a bit.
Yeah, no, very true. So before we wrap up, any kind of final tips for people, you know, maybe about, you know, interviews or navigating career paths, negotiations, you know, what have you seen from the interviews that you've been a part of?
Well, I think one of the things that's been through the biggest change in the last couple of years is the salary negotiation at the end of a process. There was definitely a couple of years where you said a number, they gave you a number, and that was the end of the process. It's definitely not quite as straightforward anymore. And we've had some really interesting conversations with people that are getting offers now that are less than they were given 2.5 years ago, where their skills were in demand. Companies were so desperate to hire. And because
that's 2 years more experience now as well. So
yeah, but the same urgency doesn't exist. The same critical project situation, we're selling so much that we can't deliver, doesn't exist right now. So I think being realistic and being, I guess, fair to employers, knowing that it isn't the greatest scenario we're in right now. I think more and more people are moving roles, not necessarily for salary, but for projects, for products, for team, for culture. I think that's why the small to medium-sized companies in the UK are doing really, really well. That kind of more not family feel, I hate that expression, but you know what I mean? Closer knit.
Yeah, boutique-y kind of partners.
Yeah, family feels just the wrong. You know, I see it on LinkedIn all the time now. It's you can't. Yeah, it's not a family. Yeah, I can't. No, it's not a family. But what I mean is just that kind of more connected environment where you're more so a part of what the company does. You're closer to the leadership and you understand the trajectory of the company more. I think that's really desirable now, and people are possibly moving less for money than they were 2 years ago. Because 2 years ago, you were in a good job, you were reasonably happy, but if you could go and do something similar for 40% more money, you know, for yourself, for your family, for your life in general, it's hard to turn that down. Yeah. When now I think people are having to move for perhaps different reasons.
Yeah. definitely. And I think the one thing I would add to that is possibly focusing, I mean, more on your CV, LinkedIn profile, also on the interview about the value that you can bring as a professional, which isn't necessarily always like I can do Apex, I can do Flow, but it's actually, you know, especially as an admin now, as we talked about before, is expected to do the technical side of the stuff, but potentially also engage with the business, engage with the stakeholders, understand what their pain points are, what isn't working, and how Salesforce can solve some of those business issues with technology and automating processes. And I would argue that stuff is probably, you know, of course the technical stuff is important, that you need to be able to do that, but also being able to engage with the business, prove you have that kind of level of business acumen, and you can actually implement solutions that are going to deliver ROI, I think are kind of what people, you know, want at the moment, that they want those kind of employees in their business.
Someone said it to me recently that every role is customer facing now. Just because you're not on their site, just because you're not in front of them, everyone's customer facing to some degree. So understanding
Sounds like a Salesforce quote.
Yeah, it could be. Imagine that's where I've got it from. I go Google it now and it's like, But yeah, I think that's definitely something that we're seeing more and more of, is kind of commercial understanding is being asked for more so than just technical skills. And do you know a kind of recruitment insight secret that isn't talked about very often? Clients never ask about certifications.
Wow.
Never. I could probably count on one hand in the last 5 years how many times a candidate has or hasn't got a job based off certifications.
Yeah, that is very interesting, actually, because I think obviously most Salesforce professionals, I would say, and I did this when I was technical, you know, you put it on your headline on LinkedIn, 7X certified or whatever, you know.
Future CTA.
Because future CTA, you know, because you are proud of it. You've worked hard to do these certs. But I think, I mean, there's been a lot of talk recently about, you know, the diminishing value of certs. You know, there's some people I mean, there's about 40 certs now, and a lot of people have, you know, 20 plus or whatever, and it's just kind of like, you know, do you have experience with all those products, or did you just go out and, you know, revise? And it's kind of fair play still. It's not easy to pass these certifications, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not diminishing the importance of them or the value in the training. Of course, it's hugely valuable. But clients don't ask for it specifically.
And that's kind of what matters, right? So consultancies not ask, even because they get points, right, for their, not really. I mean, in times like these, when times are tough, you know, the tech skills, the kind of culture fit you are, the ROI you can bring to the business is obviously going to trump.
It's what they can position you on as a project and charge the maximum rate card for. And your cert may be part of that. But you could have the cert. Let's say you're a B2C commerce certified architect, but if as soon as they put you on the customer site, you've clearly not got the experience to do that project. Yeah, it's not going to end well.
Some back when I was in consulting, and you know, someone would be presenting about me, and you know, I'm about to be in the project, and they would put, you know, he's a Salesforce MVP, and they'd always say it really proud, like, oh, and Ben's a Salesforce MVP, and the clients would just kind of like, you know, their eyes would just glaze over it, and they would say, okay, moving on, you know, because they don't know what a Salesforce MVP is, and you know,
good photo opportunities at Dreamforce.
Yeah. Do they even know I'm famous, or no?
I don't know.
Probably not.
I've always thought you're famous. I still call you Salesforce Ben. Like, I'm not even convinced you've got a surname.
No,
it's like a Brazilian footballer, isn't it? You've just got one name to me, a Salesforce Ben.
Changed by default now. Yeah. Cool. So thank you, Matt, for joining us today. It's been a really interesting chat. We've covered a lot of maybe controversial topics today, but I think it's very important to talk about them and kind of back them up with facts as well. And thank you for everyone who's been listening at home or watching us on YouTube, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.